I'm Amber, 34 years old, and I never expected to become the owner of the most ridiculed property investment in Lakewood Springs. When I purchased that abandoned, dilapidated Pinecrest hotel, my entire family thought I'd lost my mind. My brother Tyler actually recorded my announcement for posterity, as he called it. But their laughter stopped abruptly 3 months later when I showed them what I'd found hidden in a dusty filing cabinet. A legally binding contract with Elysian Resorts, one of the most prestigious luxury hotel chains in the world. Before I dive into how this abandoned property changed my life forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you love stories about risky investments that pay off in unexpected ways. Commercial real estate had been my life for 7 years before I ever laid eyes on the Pinecrest Hotel. I'd built a solid reputation at Robertson and Klein Investments in Chicago, specializing in retail and office space renovations. My colleagues respected my ability to spot diamond-in-the-rough properties, but I'd always played it relatively safe, working within the firm's conservative investment parameters. That all changed after my divorce from Craig. 5 years of marriage dissolved in a matter of months when he decided our life together wasn't exciting enough and moved to California with his yoga instructor. The divorce was finalized in February, leaving me with our condo, which I promptly sold, a decent settlement, and an overwhelming desire to start fresh. "You need a change of scenery," my friend Jessica said over wine one night. "Not just a new apartment, something completely different." She was right. Chicago held too many memories, and my job, while stable, suddenly felt stifling. I'd always dreamed of running my own investment project instead of making money for others. With my settlement and savings, I had just enough capital to take a calculated risk. I began researching smaller markets within a few hours of Chicago, places with tourism potential, but enough economic struggles to keep property prices reasonable. That's how I discovered Lakewood Springs, a town of about 15,000 people nestled beside a stunning lake and surrounded by hiking trails. It had been a popular vacation spot in the 70s and 80s, but when Interstate 67 was rerouted 20 miles away, the town's tourism slowly dried up. The real estate listing appeared in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. Historic hotel property, significant redevelopment opportunity. The asking price was surprisingly low. $850,000 for 32 rooms on 4 acres of lakefront property. The photos didn't impress. They showed faded carpet, a dated lobby with wood paneling, and an empty, leaf-filled pool. But the location was undeniable, perched on a hillside with panoramic lake views. I drove out the next day to meet the listing agent, Rachel Bennett. "I should warn you," Rachel said as we pulled into the cracked asphalt parking lot. "This place has a reputation. The Pinecrest has been sitting empty for 3 years since the owner walked away. The bank finally foreclosed. The exterior was worse than the photos suggested. Peeling paint, missing roof shingles, overgrown landscaping. A faded sign with a pine tree logo hung crooked above the entrance. Most people take one look and drive away," Rachel continued, fumbling with a large ring of keys. "The last serious inquiry was 8 months ago." Inside, the musty smell hit me immediately. Water stains marked the lobby ceiling, and the once grand staircase had missing balusters. We toured floor after floor of outdated rooms, a kitchen with ancient appliances, and a ballroom with a sagging dance floor. Yet beneath the neglect, I could see the bones of something special: high ceilings, large windows capturing lake views, and a layout that flowed naturally. "What's the history here?" I asked, running my hand along the dusty reception counter. "Built in 1980 by a local family, the Harises. It was the place to stay for about 20 years. Presidents stayed here, a few movie stars too. Then the highway changed, new hotels with modern amenities opened in nearby towns, and the Harises couldn't keep up with renovations. They sold to an investor from Detroit who tried a couple of themed rebrands that failed. Eventually, he just locked the doors and disappeared. I requested the property's financial records, occupancy history, and inspection reports. While the building needed significant work, the structure was fundamentally sound. The location was unbeatable. And something about the place, Perhaps the glimpses of its former elegance spoke to me. That weekend, I made the mistake of discussing the property at my parents' house during our monthly family dinner. "You're considering buying a failed hotel?" My brother Tyler nearly choked on his lasagna. "In a town nobody visits anymore?" "It's not that nobody visits," I explained. "Tourism is down, but the lake still draws people. The hiking trails were recently featured in Outdoor magazine." "Honey," my mother Barbara interjected, setting down her wine glass, "you're still recovering from the divorce. Major decisions should wait until you're thinking clearly." My father Jeffrey, ever the practical accountant, asked about the numbers. When I shared my initial renovation estimates and potential revenue projections, he shook his head. "You're looking at putting in at least another $1 million before seeing a dime of profit," he warned. "And that's assuming people suddenly want to visit this town again." My sister Madison, always the family peacemaker, tried to sound supportive while actually agreeing with everyone else. "It's just so much work for one person, Amber. And so far from Chicago and all your connections." By dessert, they were exchanging glances that clearly communicated their consensus. Amber is having a post-divorce breakdown. The more they doubted, the more determined I became. I returned to Lakewood Springs twice more, walking the property and exploring the town. I met with the mayor, who became animated when I mentioned possibly reviving the Pinecrest. "That hotel was our crown jewel," Mayor Fletcher said. "Its decline symbolized everything that went wrong with our tourism economy. If someone could bring it back." He trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Against my family's advice, I made an offer, $750,000, well below the asking price. After a brief negotiation, the bank accepted. 6 weeks later, I stood in the lobby holding the keys, owner of a 32-room disaster, as Tyler called it. I'd left my job, moved my essential belongings into the former manager's apartment on the ground floor, and committed virtually all my capital to a project everyone thought was doomed. But standing there that first day, watching sunlight stream through the dirty windows onto the lobby's marble floor, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my divorce: absolute certainty. Moving into the manager's apartment was like stepping back in time. The small 2-bedroom unit featured wood panel walls, shag carpeting in an unfortunate shade of orange, and appliances that predated my birth. But it was functional, barely, and living on site would save money while allowing me to work on the property day and night. My first week as a hotel owner delivered a harsh reality check. The initial property inspection had identified obvious issues like the leaking roof and outdated electrical system, but a more thorough assessment revealed problems everywhere I looked. The boiler system that heated the entire building was functioning at maybe 50% capacity. The pool had cracks that rendered it unusable without a complete rebuild. Asbestos lurked in some ceiling tiles and lead paint-covered walls in the older sections. I arranged meetings with 5 different contractors, hoping competitive bids would keep costs reasonable. They walked through the property with increasingly grim expressions, making notes and occasionally exchanging glances that clearly said, "This poor woman has no idea what she's gotten herself into." The quotes arrived, each more devastating than the last. The lowest estimate for bringing the building up to basic code compliance was $1.2 million. A full renovation to create the charming boutique hotel I envisioned would cost upwards of $3 million. "I just don't see the business case," said Frank, the most experienced contractor, as he handed me his estimate. "Even if you somehow found the money for renovations, the occupancy rates in this town couldn't support the investment." That night, alone in my apartment, I sat surrounded by estimates and inspection reports, the magnitude of my mistake sinking in. The building creaked and groaned around me. A storm had blown in from the lake, and rain found new leaks in the ceiling. I pulled my knees to my chest, fighting back tears and the urge to call my parents and admit they were right. One night of self-pity, I told myself. Then back to problem-solving tomorrow. Morning brought new challenges. The building inspector, a by-the-book official named Howard, arrived unannounced for a follow-up inspection. "I've got concerns about occupancy of this building in its current state," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Even just you living in the manager's apartment." He proceeded to identify 16 code violations that required immediate attention, with dozens more that would need addressing before any part of the hotel could legally host guests. The clipboard in his hands might as well have been a death certificate for my dreams. "You have 30 days to address the critical safety issues," Howard said as he left, "or I'll have to condemn the residential portion as well." I was tallying up the cost of the emergency repairs when a section of pipe chose that moment to burst in the ceiling above the lobby, sending a cascade of rusty water onto the marble floor. 3 hours and 2 emergency plumbers later, I had a bill for $2,700 and the news that the entire plumbing system was a ticking time bomb. 2 weeks into ownership, my contingency fund was rapidly depleting, and I hadn't made any visible improvements to the property. Each night, I fell into bed exhausted from physical labor, clearing debris, cleaning decades of grime, and cataloging everything that needed repair. Each morning, I woke with a knot of anxiety about the mountain of work ahead. My family's check-in calls had a predictable pattern. "It's not too late to sell," my father would say. "I know a great therapist who specializes in major life transitions," from my mother. "The real estate market in Chicago is hot right now," my sister would hint. And from Tyler, "Just admit you made a mistake and move on." Desperation has a way of sharpening focus. With contractors' estimates far exceeding my budget and the clock ticking on the building inspector's deadline, I needed to prioritize ruthlessly and find creative solutions. One evening, after a day spent patching roof leaks, I decided to explore the administrative offices behind the reception desk. Most rooms had been cleared of anything valuable, but a small office at the end of the hallway was locked with a key that wasn't on my ring. After some creative work with a credit card, I managed to jimmy the lock. Inside was a dusty time capsule. Filing cabinets, shelves of binders, and a desk with a calendar still open to April 2020, when the previous owner had apparently walked away. With nothing better to do, I began sorting through the files, hoping to find something useful, perhaps original building plans or vendor contacts. Most contained mundane operational records, employee files, tax documents, supply orders. I worked through cabinet after cabinet, raising clouds of dust and finding little of value. Near midnight, bleary-eyed and ready to quit, I opened a drawer labeled Corporate Contracts. Inside were a dozen hanging folders, most containing unremarkable vendor agreements. But one thick folder caught my attention: Elysian Resorts Partnership Agreement. Elysian Resorts was a name I recognized immediately. They operated some of the most exclusive luxury hotels around the world, properties where rooms started at $1,000 per night. What possible connection could they have to the dilapidated Pinecrest? I opened the folder and began reading. The contract, dated 1995, was comprehensive, over 60 pages of legal language establishing a 50-year partnership between Pinecrest Properties, the original owners, and Elysian International Holdings. The agreement granted Elysian exclusive rights to operate luxury hotels within a 50-mile radius of Lakewood Springs, but only if they maintain their partnership with the Pinecrest. According to the terms, if Elysian wanted a presence in this entire region, they had to either operate the Pinecrest or pay substantial penalties. The contract had been transferred to each subsequent owner, including, apparently, me. The most remarkable thing? The agreement was still in effect, with 15 years remaining. I stayed up until dawn, reading every page, searching for a catch or termination clause that might have been activated. But as far as I could tell, when the last owner abandoned the property, he had never formally terminated the agreement with Elysian. The contract appeared to be intact and binding. For the first time since moving in, I fell asleep with a smile on my face. The next morning, I called Jessica, who had practiced contract law before switching to real estate litigation. "I need your expert opinion on something, and I need you to not think I'm crazy," I said when she answered. "Too late for that," she laughed. "You bought an abandoned hotel in a dying town. But go on." I explained the contract I'd found and emailed her scanned copies of the key pages. There was a long silence on the line as she read. "Holy shit, Amber," she finally said. "If this is legitimate and still in force, you might have stumbled onto something significant. Elysian has been aggressively expanding in the Midwest. They just announced plans for 3 new properties last quarter. So, you think the contract could be valuable? Potentially very valuable. But you need a specialist in hospitality contract law to review this properly. This is beyond my expertise. While waiting to connect with a specialized attorney, I researched everything I could about Elysian Resorts. The company had grown exponentially since the contract was signed in 1995, evolving from a small luxury chain to a global hospitality powerhouse with over 70 properties. Their recent press releases highlighted a strategic expansion focused on undiscovered domestic destinations with natural beauty, exactly what Lakewood Springs offered. More significantly, they had no properties within 100 miles of my hotel, despite the region's growing reputation for outdoor recreation. According to the contract, if they wanted to establish a presence here, they would need to either honor their agreement with the Pinecrest or buy their way out of it. With a mix of nervousness and excitement, I called Elysian's corporate headquarters in Chicago. "I'm calling regarding your company's contract with a Pinecrest Hotel in Lakewood Springs," I told a customer service representative who answered. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached someone in their legal department. "The Pinecrest? That property has been abandoned," said the woman on the phone. "Actually, it's under new ownership. I purchased it recently, and I've discovered what appears to be an active partnership agreement between Elysian and the property." There was a pause. "I'll have someone contact you," she said before hanging up. 2 days later, I received a call from Marcus Reynolds, Elysian's regional development director. He agreed to meet me at the hotel the following week. Marcus arrived driving a sleek black Tesla, looking dramatically out of place in the cracked parking lot. In his tailored suit and designer glasses, he surveyed the dilapidated property with poorly concealed disdain. "Miss Sullivan," he said, extending his hand. "I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Any prior agreements with this property would have terminated when the previous owner defaulted." I invited him inside, navigating carefully around the areas with the worst damage. In the former restaurant, I had set up a makeshift conference space with the least decrepit furniture I could find. "I understand your position," I said, placing a copy of the contract on the table, "but according to Section 7(3), the agreement remains in effect regardless of ownership changes unless formally dissolved by both parties. There's no record of dissolution." Marcus skimmed the document with practiced nonchalance, but I noticed his expression tighten as he flipped to certain sections. He made a phone call, speaking in low tones while pacing by the windows. "Our legal team will need to review this thoroughly," he said when he returned to the table. "But even if some technical obligation exists on paper, this property clearly doesn't meet Elysian standards. The contract specifies a luxury hotel operation, which would be impossible in the current condition. The contract also specifies that Elysian is responsible for maintaining luxury-level operations," I countered. Section 12.4 outlines renovation responsibilities. Previous owners may have neglected that aspect of enforcement, but the obligation remains. Our meeting ended with Marcus taking copies of everything and promising a follow-up. His parting glance at the property was calculating rather than dismissive, the first indication that I might actually have leverage. 3 days later, I received a call from Eleanor Blackwood, Elysian's Senior Vice President of Development. "Miss Sullivan, I understand you've acquired the Pinecrest property," she said, her tone professionally warm but cautious. "Our legal team has reviewed the documentation you provided to Marcus. We'd like to discuss potential resolutions that could benefit both parties." That evening, I called my family to share the news. Their reactions ranged from confused to concerned. "So you found some old contract," Tyler said. "What makes you think a company like Elysian would honor it instead of burying you in legal fees?" "Because ignoring it could jeopardize their expansion plans," I explained, "and potentially cost them millions in penalties." "Honey," my mother said gently, "I'm worried you're pinning too much hope on this. Major corporations have ways of getting out of these situations." Even Jessica, who had initially been excited, warned me to temper my expectations. Corporations like Elysian have legal teams specifically to find loopholes in contracts like this. Don't count on anything until you have it in writing, and maybe not even then. Their skepticism was understandable. The scenario did sound far-fetched, a hospitality giant bound by a decades-old contract to a deteriorating property in a struggling tourist town. But the more I studied the agreement and researched Elysian's regional strategy, the more convinced I became that I held a valuable card. I just needed to figure out how best to play it. Eleanor Blackwood wasted no time. The day after our call, an email arrived with Elysian's initial proposal. They would pay $2 million to buy out the contract completely, releasing them from any obligation to the Pinecrest. The offer was tempting. It represented a significant profit over my $750,000 investment, even accounting for the money I'd already spent on emergency repairs. I could walk away with a tidy sum and the satisfaction of proving my family wrong about the purchase being a complete disaster. But something felt off. If Elysian was willing to offer $2 million immediately, the contract might be worth considerably more to them. On Jessica's recommendation, I consulted with Michael Donovan, an attorney specializing in hospitality contract law. His office in downtown Chicago exuded success, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river and walls lined with hospitality industry awards. Based on my preliminary review, Elysian's eagerness to resolve this quickly is telling, Michael said after examining the contract. Their $2 million offer suggests they see significant value in being released from these obligations. How significant? I asked. Let's look at the broader context. Elysian has been systematically establishing properties throughout the Midwest, but they have a conspicuous gap in this region. Your contract effectively gives you exclusivity control over a 50-mile radius, an area they can't enter without either working with you or buying you out. Michael pulled up a map on his computer, showing Elysian's properties as blue dots across the country. The area around Lakewood Springs was notably empty. Furthermore, he continued, industry reports indicate they're planning a major announcement soon, possibly an IPO or acquisition. They'll want to clear any potential complications before that happens. So what should I do? Reject the initial offer. Counter with terms that give you ongoing participation rather than a one-time payment. They'll resist, but you have more leverage than they want you to believe. I followed Michael's advice, responding to Eleanor with a courteous rejection and suggesting we discuss partnership opportunities instead of a buyout. 3 days later, I returned from a meeting with contractors to find the front windows of the hotel smashed and graffiti sprayed across the main entrance. The local police officer who responded seemed unsurprised. Probably just kids, Officer Garza said, taking minimal notes. This place has been a target for vandalism since it closed down. But the timing felt suspicious, especially when I began receiving anonymous calls suggesting I take the money while it's on the table. No explicit threats were made, but the implication was clear. Things could get more difficult if I didn't cooperate. Meanwhile, word had spread through Lakewood Springs about potential developments at the Pinecrest. Local business owners began stopping by, some offering help and others seeking information. An Elysian resort would transform this town, said Linda, who owned the bakery downtown. Property values would triple overnight. Just be careful, warned Harold from the hardware store. Last owner got himself into some kind of trouble before he disappeared. People with money don't like losing it. Most concerning was a visit from Ryan Caldwell, representing North Star Hospitality Group, a mid-tier hotel developer. I'll be direct, Ryan said, sitting across from me in the makeshift office. We've been interested in this location for some time. Whatever Elysian's offering, I'll beat it by 15%. I'm not looking to sell right now, I replied. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Everyone has a price, Miss Sullivan. And I should mention, we have excellent relationships with local officials. Building permits, inspections. These processes can be either smooth or incredibly difficult, depending on who's asking. After he left, I researched North Star and discovered they had recently announced a partnership with a company that shared board members with Elysian. The connections were too convenient to be coincidental. The pressure escalated when I received news that Elysian had announced preliminary plans for a new resort near Lake Michigan, approximately 100 miles away. This directly contradicted our contract's exclusivity clause, which prevented them from operating within a 50-mile radius without honoring their agreement with the Pinecrest. When I brought this to Michael's attention, he identified a critical clause I had overlooked. If Elysian failed to maintain operations at the Pinecrest while opening another property within the restricted zone, they would owe substantial penalties. 5% of the new property's revenue for the remainder of the contract term. This is significant leverage, Michael said. Their Lake Michigan property would be a $100 million development. 5% of revenue over 15 years could exceed $50 million. Armed with this information, I prepared to take a stronger position in negotiations. But before I could act, my family intervened with an impromptu visit to the hotel. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon. My parents, Tyler and Madison, ostensibly to see the property, but actually to stage what felt like an intervention. "We've been talking," my father began as they gathered in the lobby. "And we're concerned about the path you're on. You're fighting with a multinational corporation," Madison added. "Even if you're technically right, they have resources you can't match." Tyler was less diplomatic. "Take the $2 million and run, Amber. This isn't just about money anymore. These people play hardball. You don't understand what I found here," I insisted, trying to explain the contract's value and my vision for the property. "What I understand," Tyler shot back, "is that you're being delusional. You think you've outsmarted everyone, but you're just postponing the inevitable failure." His words stung, especially because a part of me feared he might be right. The hotel's condition wasn't improving despite my efforts. The inspector's deadline was approaching. And now I potentially had powerful enemies actively working against me. That night, after my family left, I wandered through the empty hotel corridors, questioning my decisions. In the ballroom, moonlight filtered through the dusty windows onto the damaged dance floor. Had I made a catastrophic mistake? Was I clinging to this property out of stubbornness, or worse, to prove my family wrong? In the former gift shop, I found an old guest book that had been overlooked during previous cleanouts. Flipping through its pages, I read entry after entry from people who had celebrated significant moments at the Pinecrest, honeymoons, anniversaries, family reunions. They described the hotel as magical, our special place, where memories are made. One entry particularly struck me. 25 years ago, my husband proposed to me on the Pinecrest Terrace. Today, we brought our children to show them where our family began. Thank you for preserving this beautiful place. Something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about winning a corporate negotiation or proving my family wrong. The Pinecrest had meant something to people. It could again. I closed the guest book. My resolve strengthened. I wasn't ready to give up. The email from Eleanor Blackwood was brief. Our executive team would like to meet regarding the Pinecrest situation. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Elysian Corporate Headquarters, Chicago. Michael advised caution. They're bringing you to their territory. It's a power play. Should I refuse? No, but don't go alone. I'll accompany you. Elysian's headquarters occupied the top floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. We were escorted to a conference room where 5 people waited. Eleanor, Marcus, 2 stern-looking men introduced as legal counsel, and a sharp-featured woman named Vivian Chen, Elysian's chief operating officer. Ms. Sullivan, Vivian began without preamble. We appreciate your entrepreneurial spirit, but this situation has dragged on long enough. We have a business to run. She nodded to one of the attorneys, who slid a document across the table. Our final offer, Vivian continued. $3.5 million for the property and all associated contract rights. The papers are ready for signature. I glanced at the document, but didn't touch it. May I ask what's changed since your $2 million offer? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor studied her manicure. Vivian's expression remained impassive. We've become aware of your conversations with North Star, she said. We're simply ensuring our offer remains competitive. So they were monitoring my meetings. The realization sent a chill through me. We've also learned about your financial situation, Vivian continued. The building inspector's deadline is next week. Your contractors require 50% deposits before beginning critical repairs. You're running out of both time and money, Miss Sullivan. Her assessment was accurate, which made it all the more unsettling. Michael had warned me they might have sources within local government and banking. Our offer expires at the end of this meeting, Vivian concluded. After that, we pursue other options. What other options? Michael asked. The second attorney cleared his throat. Elysian reserves the right to challenge the contract's validity. The previous owner's abandonment, combined with the property's deterioration below operational standards, provides grounds for nullification. That would be an interesting argument to make in court, Michael replied, especially given Section 12.4 regarding renovation responsibilities. Not to mention the announcement of your Lake Michigan property, which directly violates the exclusivity clause. Tension filled the room. Eleanor and Marcus exchanged glances. One of the attorneys whispered something to Vivian. I thought about the guestbook entries, about Lakewood Springs' potential, and about proving my own judgment right. The $3.5 million would solve my immediate problems, but it wouldn't satisfy the deeper reason I'd bought the Pinecrest. I appreciate your offer, I said, but I'm not interested in selling. I'm interested in a partnership, the one your company already committed to 25 years ago. Vivian's composure cracked slightly. That's not realistic. The Pinecrest doesn't align with Elysian's current brand standards. It could, with proper investment. The location and property fundamentals are exceptional. Ms. Sullivan, Vivian said, her tone hardening, you need to understand your position. If you refuse this offer, Elysian will use every legal means to void this outdated contract. We'll tie this matter up in litigation until your property falls into foreclosure. You'll lose everything you've invested. That's enough, Michael interjected. Threats of bad faith litigation could constitute tortious interference. The meeting deteriorated from there. No agreement was reached, and we left with Vivian's warning hanging in the air. You'll regret not taking this offer. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived containing a formal cease and desist letter from Elysian's attorneys, claiming that any assertion of the contract's validity constituted business defamation. My family's reaction was panic. My father called immediately after I forwarded them the letter. Amber, this has gone too far, he pleaded. These people are serious. They'll destroy you financially and legally. Dad, I can't just give up. There's too much potential here. Potential won't matter if you're bankrupted by legal fees, he argued. Sometimes cutting your losses is the smartest move. Even Madison, usually the supportive one, texted, Please stop this foolishness before it's too late. That evening was my lowest point. Sitting alone in the manager's apartment, surrounded by legal threats and repair estimates, I felt the weight of everyone's doubt, including my own. The building inspector's deadline was 3 days away. Contractors were waiting for deposits I couldn't afford. And now a powerful corporation was threatening legal action. I called Michael, expecting him to finally advise surrender. They're bluffing, he said instead. If they were confident about invalidating the contract, they wouldn't have offered $3.5 million. So, what do? Stop playing defense. The contract has a specific performance clause that you haven't invoked yet. It requires Elysian to either operate the Pinecrest as a luxury property or pay substantial penalties if they open any hotel within the exclusivity zone. And they've announced the Lake Michigan property, I said, understanding dawning. Exactly. Send formal notice activating the specific performance requirement. Force them to make a choice. Honor the contract or face penalties that would make their $3.5 million offer look like pocket change. The next morning, I had Michael prepare the formal notice. We documented Elysian's announcement of the Lake Michigan Resort and calculated the potential penalties based on projected revenue. The final figure was staggering, potentially over $50 million over the remaining contract term. As Michael's assistant left to deliver the notice to Elysian's headquarters, I discovered something else significant. Elysian had filed preliminary IPO paperwork with the SEC. They were planning to go public within 6 months. Any major contract dispute or penalty obligation would need to be disclosed to potential investors, potentially impacting their valuation by hundreds of millions of dollars. For the first time since entering negotiations, I felt like I might actually have the upper hand. With the inspector's deadline looming and my financial resources dwindling, I needed to act quickly. Michael had bought me some time with legal maneuvering, but I needed to strengthen my position beyond legal arguments. I began researching Elysian's upcoming IPO, learning that their brand reputation was central to their valuation strategy. They had positioned themselves as the most trusted name in luxury hospitality, emphasizing their commitment to honoring commitments to partners and communities. Through Jessica's connections, I arranged a discreet meeting with Samantha Rivers, a financial reporter who covered the hospitality industry. "I'm not looking to generate negative publicity," I explained as we sat in a quiet coffee shop far from Elysian's headquarters. "I just want to ensure that all the facts are available if this situation escalates." I provided Samantha with copies of the original contract and documentation of Elysian's competing development plans. No commentary, just facts. She asked insightful questions about the property's history and potential. "This is interesting timing with their IPO approaching," she noted. "I'll keep this on my radar." No article was published immediately, but having a knowledgeable reporter aware of the situation created a potential check on Elysian's aggressive tactics. Meanwhile, I focused on generating local support. I scheduled a meeting with the Lakewood Springs Tourism Board, preparing a presentation on the potential economic impact of revitalizing the Pinecrest. A luxury hotel would bring an estimated 30,000 to 40,000 annual visitors, I explained to the 7 board members. Based on average luxury traveler spending, that translates to approximately $12 million flowing into local businesses annually. The board members were skeptical but intrigued. When I mentioned Elysian's potential involvement, their interest visibly increased. "Elysian has a reputation for integrating with local communities," I continued, showing slides of other Elysian properties that featured local artisans and food producers. Their business model could create dozens of secondary opportunities for Lakewood Springs residents. Board Chairwoman Diane Foster asked the question everyone was thinking: why would Elysian invest in our town when tourism has been declining for years? "Because the trends are changing," I replied, displaying data on the growing popularity of domestic lake destinations and outdoor recreation tourism. Lakewood Springs has what luxury travelers increasingly want: natural beauty, authenticity, and an uncrowded experience. The presentation resonated. By the end, the tourism board unanimously voted to send a letter to Elysian expressing support for revitalizing the Pinecrest and offering tax incentives for job creation. I followed a similar approach with the town council and chamber of commerce, building a coalition of local stakeholders who stood to benefit from the hotel's revival. Each supportive letter and resolution strengthened my negotiating position with Elysian, demonstrating that I wasn't operating in isolation. Through the Town Historical Society, I connected with Joseph Harris, grandson of the original Pinecrest architects. Now in his 70s, Joseph still had his grandfather's original plans and design concepts. "The hotel was designed to celebrate the lake," Joseph explained as we reviewed the faded blueprints. Every principal room was positioned to capture a specific view. Even the hallways were aligned with particular sunrise and sunset angles throughout the year. This architectural intention had been obscured by decades of haphazard renovations and neglect. Joseph agreed to create updated renderings showing how the property could be restored to its original vision while incorporating modern luxury elements. Simultaneously, I launched a modest social media campaign highlighting the Pinecrest's history and potential future. I shared vintage photos from the Historical Society alongside guestbook entries, creating a narrative about reviving a beloved local landmark. The campaign gained traction, particularly among former guests who shared their own memories and photos. By the time Howard, the building inspector, returned for his follow-up inspection, I had addressed the most critical safety issues and secured temporary permits based on the comprehensive renovation plan Joseph had helped develop. The Town Council's Economic Development Committee had also intervened on my behalf, recognizing the project's potential value to Lakewood Springs. Just as this local momentum was building, I received an unexpected call from Catherine Winters, Elysian's CEO. "Ms. Sullivan," she said, her voice measured and direct, I'd like to discuss the Pinecrest situation personally. Would you be available to meet tomorrow? Not at our offices, somewhere more neutral. We agreed to meet at a small restaurant halfway between Chicago and Lakewood Springs. I arrived early, selecting a quiet corner table. Catherine arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably, but without the entourage of executives and attorneys from the previous meeting. I've reviewed the entire situation, she began after minimal pleasantries. And I believe we've started on the wrong foot. I agree, I replied cautiously. Elysian values its reputation for integrity. The aggressive approach taken by some members of my team doesn't reflect our company's values. She paused. That said, we have practical concerns about the contract as it stands. I understand. I'm not trying to extract unreasonable penalties or prevent Elysian's growth. I'm looking for a solution that honors the contract's intent while benefiting both parties. Catherine studied me for a moment. You've prepared a proposal? I opened my portfolio and slid a document across the table, a comprehensive partnership framework that Michael and I had developed. It proposed Elysian would invest in renovating the Pinecrest to their luxury standards, while I would maintain partial ownership and local management responsibilities. The exclusivity clause would remain in effect, but with modifications allowing Elysian to develop their Lake Michigan property without penalties. Catherine read through the document carefully, asking occasional clarifying questions. Her expression remained neutral, but I noticed her nodding slightly at certain points. Your proposal is more reasonable than I expected, she finally said. But I need to be direct. The contract's legal standing is debatable. We could challenge its validity. You could, I acknowledged, but that approach has risks for Elysian as well. Beyond the legal costs and potential penalties, there's the reputation impact during your IPO preparation. Investors might question Elysian's commitment to honoring its obligations. Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly. You've done your homework. I have. Just as I've researched the strategic value of this location to Elysian's Midwest expansion. The Pinecrest offers something unique that aligns perfectly with your brand's evolution toward experiential luxury in natural settings. For the first time, Catherine's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing genuine interest. Our market research does show increasing demand for lake and forest destinations with historical character.
Exactly.
And Lakewood Springs offers authenticity that can't be manufactured. The town has rallied behind the Pinecrest's revival. You'd be entering a community eager to support your success. I showed her the letters from the Tourism Board, Town Council, and Chamber of Commerce, along with Joseph's architectural renderings showing how the restored property could become a showcase for Elysian's brand. The local support is impressive, Catherine admitted. Most communities are wary of luxury developments changing their character. Because this wouldn't be changing the town's character, it would be restoring it. The Pinecrest was always meant to be a landmark destination. Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, moving from confrontational negotiation to collaborative problem-solving. By the end, Catherine had acknowledged 2 critical points. The contract likely had enough legal validity to cause significant complications for Elysian, and the Pinecrest actually represented an opportunity that aligned with their strategic direction. I'll need to discuss this with our board, she said as we prepared to leave. But I believe we can find a path forward that works for both parties. That's all I've wanted from the beginning, I replied. As we shook hands, Catherine added, For what it's worth, I'm impressed with how you've handled this situation. Not many people would stand their ground against Elysian. That evening, I called a family meeting at my parents' house. They arrived with expressions ranging from concerned to resigned, clearly expecting me to announce surrender. I met with Elysian's CEO today. I began once everyone was seated. And my father prompted, bracing for bad news. And we're working toward a partnership agreement. They're considering a major investment in renovating the Pinecrest to Elysian standards while I maintain partial ownership. Stunned silence filled the room. You're joking, Tyler finally said. I'm not. Nothing's finalized yet, but Catherine, the CEO, seemed genuinely interested in the partnership approach. Madison looked confused. So, they're not suing you? Not at the moment, no. My mother shook her head. I don't understand. What changed? Several things, I explained. The contract has real legal weight. The Pinecrest location aligns with their strategic direction, and the local community support makes the project more viable. My family remained skeptical until the following week when a formal letter of intent arrived from Elysian, outlining preliminary partnership terms for the Pinecrest renovation and operation. The letter, signed by Catherine herself, validated everything I'd told them. For the first time since I'd purchased the property, my family began to consider that I might have made a brilliant investment rather than a catastrophic mistake. 6 weeks of intensive negotiations followed, with teams of attorneys parsing every detail of the partnership agreement. The final document, nearly 200 pages long, transformed my impulsive hotel purchase into something far beyond what I'd initially imagined. Under the agreement, Elysian would invest $20 million in completely renovating the Pinecrest to their luxury standards. I would maintain 30% ownership of the property, while Elysian would handle operations through their management division. The hotel would be rebranded as Elysian Lakewood Springs Resort, becoming their flagship property for a new collection focused on historic destinations. The signing ceremony took place in the Pinecrest's dusty ballroom, the last time it would be seen in its deteriorated state. Catherine and I posed for photos with the signed agreement, surrounded by representatives from the town council and tourism board. Local media covered the event, highlighting the economic impact the renovated hotel would bring to Lakewood Springs. This partnership represents Elysian's commitment to preserving historic properties while creating extraordinary guest experiences, Catherine told reporters. We're excited to restore the Pinecrest to its rightful place as a premier destination. What she didn't mention publicly, but had acknowledged during negotiations, was that my discovery of the contract had accelerated their timeline for entering the region. The Pinecrest would now become the centerpiece of their Midwest expansion rather than an obligation to be minimized. The renovation process began immediately and progressed with the efficiency that Elysian's resources made possible. Teams of architects, designers, and contractors transformed the property. The original architectural elements Joseph Harris had identified were restored and highlighted, while modern luxury amenities were seamlessly integrated. Throughout the 18-month renovation, I remained deeply involved, serving as the liaison between Elysian and the local community. My commercial real estate background proved valuable as I helped navigate local regulations and building requirements. Catherine even offered me a consulting role for other historic property acquisitions in Elysian's pipeline, an unexpected career opportunity born from what had started as a post-divorce crisis purchase. The grand reopening ceremony took place on a perfect June evening. The transformed property was breathtaking. The lobby's marble floors restored to a gleaming finish, the ballroom's crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across the polished dance floor, and the terrace offering panoramic views of the lake through floor-to-ceiling windows. My family arrived together, dressed for the black tie event, but still carrying a hint of disbelief in their expressions. I gave them a private tour before the official ceremony began. "I can't believe this is the same place," Madison whispered as we entered the main restaurant, now a glass-enclosed space that seemed to float above the lake. My father ran his hand along the restored wood paneling in the library bar. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary." My mother simply squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. Tyler was the last to acknowledge the transformation. As we stood on the terrace watching the sunset paint the lake in gold and crimson, he finally turned to me. "I was wrong," he said simply. "What you saw here, I couldn't see it. None of us could." "It's okay," I replied. There were plenty of moments when I doubted myself, too. "No, it's not okay," he insisted. "I called you delusional. I recorded your announcement to mock you later. And now." He gestured at the stunning property around us. "You've created something amazing here." His apology meant more than the financial success or professional validation. Throughout the journey, my family's doubt had often been the hardest challenge to overcome. The Elysian Lakewood Springs Resort opened to immediate success, booked solid for its first 6 months. The town experienced a renaissance as new businesses opened to serve the influx of affluent visitors. Property values rose, and several other historic buildings downtown underwent renovations inspired by the Pinecrest's transformation. My 30% ownership translated to significant ongoing income, while my role consulting on other Elysian projects provided a new career path I had never anticipated. The $750,000 investment that my family had ridiculed now generated annual returns exceeding the original purchase price. But the financial success was only part of the story. The experience had taught me invaluable lessons about business, risk, and self-belief. First, thorough research is essential, but sometimes the most valuable information is hidden where others haven't bothered to look. The contract that changed everything had been sitting in a dusty filing cabinet for years, overlooked by previous owners who didn't recognize its significance. Second, persistence in the face of pressure can reveal opportunities that aren't visible initially. Had I accepted Elysian's first offer, or even their final offer, I would have walked away with a profit, but missed the much greater potential of a long-term partnership. Third, sometimes the best negotiating position comes from understanding what the other party truly values. Elysian's concern about their IPO and brand reputation ultimately proved more influential than their legal arguments. And finally, believing in your own judgment, even when everyone around you expresses doubt, can be the difference between ordinary outcomes and extraordinary ones. The Pinecrest had always been a diamond in the rough. It just needed someone who could see beyond its tarnished surface. 1 year after the opening, I hosted a special dinner for my family on the hotel's terrace. As we enjoyed a meal prepared by the resort's award-winning chef, I proposed a toast. To seeing potential where others see problems, I said, raising my glass. And to believing in possibilities even when they seem impossible. Later that evening, I stood alone on the terrace, watching moonlight shimmer across the lake. The journey from that first day standing in the lobby with keys in hand to now had been harder and more rewarding than I could have imagined. A guest book similar to the one that had inspired me during my darkest moment now sat in the lobby, already filling with new memories being created within these restored walls. The Pinecrest, now Elysian Lakewood Springs, was once again a place where celebrations happened and lasting memories were formed. I had transformed a dead hotel into a thriving destination. But in many ways, the hotel had transformed me too, from someone healing from a painful divorce into a confident business owner who trusted her instincts and stood her ground. Have you ever taken a risk that others thought was crazy, but turned out to be brilliantly right? Or found unexpected value in something others had written off as worthless? Share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey of turning an abandoned property into a luxury destination, please like, subscribe, and share with friends who appreciate stories about seeing potential where others don't. Thanks for coming along on this incredible journey with me. May you always find the hidden value in your own life's opportunities.